but Tom Brady turned the lights on at the Patriots facility for 23 years. But on Sunday, he went out like he was the best quarterback in the NFL, and that's how he played. So that's what I mean by humility and confidence. It's the humility to know that you can always get better and you're willing to do whatever it takes to continue to get better. But when you're put in the position to perform and execute, you have the confidence that because of that practice, because of that commitment and work ethic, that you're going to perform and execute and do your job. And I think that's when I say the combination of humility and confidence, that's what I mean. And that's a hard mindset because it's easy to get complacent, especially in sales, because you do have good quarters, you do have good years, but you can always get better. And,
And there's always someone better.
there's always someone better. And then on the other side of that, you also have really bad quarters and really bad years, and we've all had them. And you have to approach that next quarter or that next year with the confidence that it isn't going to happen again, right? Because if you don't, then it's going to be a real rough ride in sales. So
J.R. Butler is the CEO and founder of the Shift Group, and in our interview, he covers a range of topics, including the balance between talent and coaching, personal drivers of success, and practical leadership strategies. And during our discussion, we also touch on the transferability skills of sports to sales and highlight the importance of effective coaching and continuous improvement. Throughout the conversation, JR's personal anecdotes and insights offer valuable insights for listeners who are pursuing a successful career in sales or sales management. All right, JR, I know you're a hockey guy, but I got to get your feedback on some football news. You're a
uh,
native in the New England, Massachusetts area. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. And I have a couple twists on this, so hold on one second. So, everyone, we're recording this podcast. Today is Thursday, January 11th, 2024, and the world just found out that Bill Belichick is no longer a New England Patriot coach. He's out after 24 seasons, 17 AFC championship titles, with 11 of those being in a row, which is an NFL record, and 6 Super Bowl titles. Again, I know you're a big hockey guy, but I know you're probably a New England fan as well, or at least, I mean, you're 45 minutes away from Foxborough, so I'm sure it's just like in the air at this point. So, as a native, I'm sure you're stunned. What's up? What are your thoughts?
I consider myself a football guy too, Derrick. I
Okay.
was a captain of my high school football team, and I was probably a better football player, believe it or not, than a hockey player. But yeah, Patriots fan, ride or die. I've since the old days, since we were terrible.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
Foxborough Stadium, Pete Carroll, like you name it, I was there. Bill Parcells. It's a controversial topic in New England is Brady versus Belichick, probably
Right.
everywhere.
Right.
My family is split down the middle. My brothers are Brady guys, me and my dad are Belichick guys. And this is a very sad day in our world. I get it. I understand why they had to do it. I kind
I
of
mean, yeah.
expected it,
Hmm.
but it hurts. I think he'll always be a Patriot to me, I mean you just talked about the last 23 years that we've had with him has been absolutely incredible. We all owe him so much fun time, so much celebrations. So I'll always be a Bill guy. I'll always be a Belichick guy, and I like listen. Tom Brady's amazing, but Tom Brady isn't Tom Brady without Bill Belichick.
Well, see, I'm
That's
glad you said that. That's kind of where I wanted to go with this, and we're gonna strike some parallels. We're gonna strike a lot of parallels and analogies here in this conversation, folks. So, put your sports cat cap on. For those that don't know what we're talking about, that aren't maybe close to it, and I look, I'm not a big football guy. I'm more of a basketball guy myself. So, but I saw this come out, and I just had to put it together with this interview. The thing that we were talking about with Brady versus Belichick is Tom Brady was their quarterback for many years. Again, Tom Brady came after Belichick, right? So
yeah.
New England sucked. Belichick came on, retooled, rebuild, restaffed, did all the things, new playbook, and they started winning. And Brady was part of that restructuring. Then, towards the end of Brady's career, he leaves, there's a rift between the coach. We don't know what it is exactly, but something went down with Brady and their head coach, Belichick. Brady leaves and goes and joins another football team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and wins a championship right away. So is it the player or is it the coach? So the analogy I want to strike here is let's layer this into sales. That's what we're kind of here to talk about, right? It's a sales consultant podcast. New VP of sales comes into an organization that's never hit their revenue target. He retools, he rebuilds, he hires some A players. One of them becomes an absolute stud, right? And they win all these championships. And then that stud leaves for the competition. Okay. Then the company stops hitting their target. Is it the player or is it the coach? Is it the rep or is it the manager, the leader? Like, what is it? Like, what comes first in this? Is it environmental conditions that leaders are creating, or is it individual talent? Where do you, if it's 100%, what percentage do you give to each one of these?
So here's the key thing to think about in that analogy. Tom Brady came in as a BDR, as far as we're concerned. Backup
Okay.
quarterback behind Drew Bledsoe, never took an NFL snap before he was under the tutelage of Bill Belichick. So
Good knowledge. Good knowledge.
in your story, this rep that VP of sales hired that person as a BDR, and then that person under the tutelage of that VP of sales became an absolute killer and crushed their quota, and obviously had a big enough impact that when they left, that quota was gone, right? That revenue was gone. So in that situation, in that case, that BDR might have been a great rep, right? Absolutely, like Tom Brady had all the tools, but without that environment, without that structure, without that process and the culture that VP of sales built, that BDR doesn't become number one, like company changing type of hire. Neither does Tom Brady. So that's my take, and I'm sticking with it.
Okay.
And I like that analogy too, by the way. I think
Yeah,
it's
of
right
course.
on.
Yeah, and I think that's debatable. I think what you're saying is debate. It's arguable
It is.
because we never know. We'll never know. We never
We
know
won't.
if Brady would have went to the Raiders here in my hometown, my team. Would he have flourished under, I don't know, who was it, Gruden at the time or somebody? Yeah, would have the same things transpired? And is it the team around them? Is it the sales ops, revenue ops, the enablement team? Is it the marketing and the leads? I mean,
Totally.
attribution, right? So no,
Yeah.
but I thought that would start us off well and set the tone for what we're going to talk about a little bit. So let's go down your track record a little bit. Let's talk about your back of your football card. Account manager, start of his career, BDR manager, AE, regional director, which was the first time leading, it looks like, based on LinkedIn, and had a team of AEs, which he grew from 3 to 7, one of which got promoted to a regional director. So that says a lot about JR's coaching and mentorship. Then he goes into a VP of sales, then becomes a CRO, then a GTM, go to market advisor, and is now a CEO founder. This is all in about 15 years, all the while coaching a youth hockey team for about the last 13 years. So you're crushing it today on LinkedIn with amazing audience that you've built up. And I can always feel the energy. When I hear posts, when I hear your podcast interviews, it's hype, it's energy, it's you're transferring the enthusiasm. It's working, man. The flag is tall and proud. So here's my question. I want you to, like, don't answer the first thing that comes to mind. Dig deep on this. When you look back over the last 15 years, all these things you're doing, all this impact that you're having on lives and businesses, what's driving you, man? Like, what's at the core? And don't give me the I want to help companies do well and come on. Honestly, what happened 15 years ago? What happened in your youth? What happened in college that drove this level of fire in your belly?
So I'd say it's two things. And I'm digging deep here, and I'm definitely getting like, being honest with you.
Appreciate it.
I'm a first generation college graduate. My parents are second generation Americans.
Congratulations on
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and like my parents worked hard and gave us a phenomenal life we didn't want for anything. But I also was put because of hockey. I went away to a boarding school when I was 15 years old.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the eighth most expensive secondary school in the world. I did not pay for that school. I was a financial aid kid, and I was surrounded by a lot of kids with a lot of money.
Mm,
Um, and there was like just the way they viewed the world, the things that they could do that I couldn't do, and feeling left out a lot, and
Mm,
not feeling as good as them. Not
right.
which, like, looking back, right? It's like it's their parents' money. Like, why did I care,
But I
right?
think
But
all of us listening can understand that. Yeah,
yeah,
that would be
so
tough. Yeah.
yeah, so like from a financial drive perspective, Derek, like I don't ever want my children to feel that way, number one. And I don't ever want to feel that way. Like I made the decision at a really young age of 15 years old that like money was never going to be a reason why I couldn't do something.
Mm.
Um, and like from a career and a professional perspective, that has always driven me. And I'm a capitalist at heart. Like I want to make a lot of money. I think it's a cool combination we have of mission and margin here. But at the end of the day, like I'm trying to build a really healthy, profitable, big business. And that's always been, as a salesperson and a sales leader, that's what's driven me, is to make a lot of money. Um,
Is that a
separate,
competitive drive? I hate to cut you off, and hold your thought. There's a second part to this that you were going to say, but is
yeah.
that about competition? Would you say at the heart of it?
Yeah. I mean, well, that's kind of the second part of it. Exactly
Ah,
what I was going to say is, from like a childhood perspective, okay, I'm the oldest of three boys.
got it.
My father is a Hall of Fame hockey coach.
35 years coaching.
That's right. My little brother, Bobby, um, played 16 years of professional hockey, got drafted into the NHL, represented Team USA in the Olympics. Was really, and I asked my dad one time when I was like 27, when did he know Bob was going to be an NHL player? And he told me he knew when he was 7 years old. And my dad's a hockey guy, so that's no BS.
Right,
So
right.
I grew up, Derek, the number one only thing I cared about my whole life was hockey. And I had a little brother that was literally better than me.
Yep.
So like when you talk about like, oh yeah, I'm competitive, like I would want to beat him in everything that I could because I
I'll drink
couldn't
my milk faster than you.
I couldn't beat him in the thing that mattered the most to me
Yeah.
or that mattered the most to my father. So like I've always had this like drive to be the best because I've never been the best, even in my own household, right? So like I think at the core of who I am and how I operate, like that's what's driving me the most is like, and I've worked through this in therapy if you can't
I
tell.
was gonna
Um,
say.
but like at the end of the day, it's a feature and a bug a little bit with me.
Mm,
But I think like when you talk about that career trajectory and the growth and driving these teams that I've driven, like that's like being on the top of the leaderboard is something that I didn't get to experience a lot as a child, even as a
you made up
teenager.
for it in a big way in B2B, but
100%,
yeah,
100%. And that was kind of the driving force, I think, and still is to this day. Like I want to be the best, the 100%, no doubt about it.
I love that. I love that. I have a younger brother who's a football coach at a private university here in Southern California. And yeah, he since he was in elementary school, it was always football and it was always the Raiders. I mean, it was obsessive even then. And so to this point now that he actually is living the dream that he said he would do, it fired me up a lot in what I was doing. I'm not gonna lie. And like I was this, tech sales guy. I was having a progressive career and I was watching my brother, finish college, go into coaching and like follow through with his plan. And here I am in this 9 to 5, kind of, doing my thing, making money, taking care of the family. I'm all right. But I had this deeper passion and entrepreneurial ambition inside of me. And so, yeah, I think in some ways, and I've never told him this, I kind of feel like I'm competing with him as my younger, maybe 2 years younger. He's not as much younger than you, but yeah, it's not on sports. Because I would say I'd probably still beat it. I would have beat him in football then. No, if he hears this, he's gonna give me shit. Anyways, let's move on. I appreciate that. And I thank you for being real on that. That means a lot because a lot of times we get into some of these interviews and we just want to kind of give that superficial view. But
Totally.
at the heart of performance management, at the heart of behavior change, is this kind of stuff. It's being able to tap into those intrinsic motivators that your people have, and how do you do that? And I think trying to get past the layers in a 45-minute interview here is kind of telling. But let's double click here. So one of the things that we want to talk about, as I mentioned, is the parallels between sports and sales. And you've been quoted as saying that the athletes have the right balance of humility and confidence. I heard you say that on a podcast, and it struck me. So I wanted you to see if you can triple click on that. What does that mean? Right balance of humility and confidence.
So when I think about humility and confidence, humility comes from, well, both of those start with self-awareness, Derrick, right? Which is kind of
Mhm.
what you're talking about, right? Like getting down into the intrinsic drivers and motivations and who you really are as a human being. Um, and when I talk about the humility of an athlete, I mean that they know that they can get better. They know that they're not perfect and they know that they need to practice.
Right.
And at the same time, and we'll use Tom Brady since we've already talked about him. Tom Brady knew he's the best quarterback in the NFL, but Tom Brady turned the lights on at the Patriots facility for 23 years, right? But on Sunday, he went out like he was the best quarterback in the NFL, and that's how he played. So that's what I mean by humility and confidence. It's the humility to know that you can always get better and you're willing to do whatever it takes to continue to get better. But when you're put in the position to perform and execute, you have the confidence that because of that practice, because of that commitment and work ethic, that you're going to perform and execute and do your job. And I think that's when I say the combination of humility and confidence, that's what I mean. And that's a hard mindset because it's easy to get complacent, especially in sales, because you do have good quarters, you do have good years, but you can always get better.
And there's
You
always
know,
someone better.
there's always someone better. And then on the other side of that, you also have really bad quarters and really bad years, and we've all had them. And you have to approach that next quarter or that next year with the confidence that it isn't going to happen again, right? Because if you don't, then it's going to be a real rough ride in sales. So that's really like at the core of that humility and confidence combination. That's really what I have in my brain.
How do you balance that though with the idea that sometimes success early breeds complacency? You've seen it. You have one good game or we score one touchdown or one goal and we're celebrating and we're getting complacent. In sales, same thing, one good quarter, one good year, and we just take our foot off the gas pedal. How do you balance that idea that athletes inherently bring this with them, but we know even in sports that complacency can breed itself? So, I mean, how do you balance that, being with what
It,
you just said?
I think it's all about structure, like process and systems, right? Like it doesn't matter at the end of the season if the Patriots won the Super Bowl or not. Like 2 weeks later, Tom Brady's back in the gym, right? Because that's his process, that's his
Right.
system, and
Hmm.
he's gonna work that. So like that's a huge part of what we talk about is like your operating rhythm and how you're approaching your day to day. You've got to build these systems and processes to continue to get better no matter, and that's what you focus on, right? You don't focus on the outcome
Right.
comes from the process, from the system. So the way you avoid complacency is you have that great quarter, but it doesn't matter because you're going to work the process again because that's why you had a great quarter, right? And
Right. Exactly.
we all know salespeople that have had great quarters and great years because of some things that happened and fell into place and
Windfall.
luck. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like, and I always tell people, right, a broken clock is right twice a day. If you didn't get there because you have the right system and process, you just got lucky, and you don't make a career off of being lucky.
Yeah, the inbound leads were good last year, but marketing has shifted directions or lost budget and it's not going to be what it was. So you need to get out there and feed yourself. Are you going to be able to maintain that? So yeah, this is a topic I feel like I could riff on with for hours. Previously on the show, I've had a college football player who turned SDR, turned AE, a former Olympic track and field athlete turned SDR manager, and then turned sales consultant. I had a VP of sales who coaches youth basketball and wrote a book called The Point Guard Approach, which talks about the parallels of sports and sales. And his name's
Oh,
Jeremy
cool.
Lehner. Check out that book. But I'm not firmly in the camp that athletes are uniquely qualified and that they inherently transfer these attributes over to sales from sports? Because I've seen myself too many times where I'm working with reps that have a sports background, hired a ton of athletes, and yet they still fall into some of these things that we've talked about, right? So do you really believe that sports is uniquely qualified to position people for sales, or are there other disciplines that you think could help a person master discipline, practice, all those attributes that we love to talk about in sports and those parallels? Are there other disciplines you think that provide that?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I'm not delusional to think that athletes are the only folks that, in fact, as you know, we work with veterans too, right? So like
Right,
that's one
exactly.
that I'm not going to overemphasize that one because that one is very similar. But like teachers, bartenders and waiters, musicians,
Musicians.
actors,
And you have an
yes,
art
like
degree, right? So I mean artists, right?
yeah, yeah. My friends hear that they will laugh. It was art. It was art history. We called it art in the dark. That's a long story for a whole other
Next
podcast.
episode, next interview, next interview.
But my perspective, and this is not it's not popular, but I do believe that sports specifically, there is no better match and parallel when it comes to not just characteristics, which is what you're talking about,
Mhm.
but environment also matters. Like the environment of playing sports is the same environment as being a salesperson, and there is not another like meritocracy type environment where you're on a depth chart, you're being measured constantly, and there's a scoreboard, right? So yes, you can develop all these other characteristics in these other areas, and there's also like things that waiters and waitresses and musicians have that athletes don't. But I think
Yeah.
there's no place in the world where you can get used to the environment of a scoreboard and working in a team and this high pressure, and being adaptable and being measured constantly like sports. And that's my take. Like I absolutely see the value of a musician, an actor, a bartender, a waiter, a teacher, especially, or a coach. Like that's all day, every day. But like the exact match between sales and sports is really, really strong. And nobody has ever changed my mind on that and given me a better example.
No, I'm with you 100%. I think music, not that I'm a musician at all, don't even ask me to pick up an instrument. But I feel like that, and I've been close to it long enough in my life that that is a pretty close discipline. Now, you're working on a team if you're in a orchestra, for instance, right?
Totally.
And you always have someone on the wings waiting to take your place if you can't hit that note. And it brings me to my next point about practice. And you've talked about practice in other interviews. So we won't go down the superficial side of this. I want to get into the application of practice in sales, right? You coach a youth hockey team, so you probably practice way more than you have games, right?
Oh yeah.
So, in the application of practice in a sales organization, what does that look like? Because individuals can practice on their own, the Brady effect. I'm in there early, I'm staying late, I'm back in the gym. Let's talk about Kobe Bryant, profusely known for going right back into the on the court after the game was over and shooting 1,000 free throws. It's this individual commitment to practice. Got it. That's a point. But I really want the leaders and other consultants on here to take away the application of practice in a sales organization, right? Like, how do you operationalize this in a sales environment? How do you get I mean, are there drills that we should be running on a regular basis? I mentioned my brother earlier, and I know this is a loaded question, so I'll give you a second to talk. I'm sorry to hog the mic. But when we were talking recently, he was telling me about this 225 test. It's a bench press at 225, and one of the positions that he coaches. This is how he tests. It's a litmus test for these players. We want to see what your max is in your freshman year, and then your max by your sophomore year should be more, and then junior year and senior year should progressively improve. And so he would talk about how players come back from off season and they're still maxing the same 225 that they were, last season. So they didn't work on it themselves. Okay, so it's individual stuff. But the stuff that he spends time on, and I'm sure you do as a coach, is these drills that you're running every night with your players. So what does that look like in a sales organization? What kind of drills should be running? How do we operationalize this? Because it's not happening enough.
Right. So I talk to my team about this a lot. I always say, you know, on a bad team, nobody holds anybody accountable, right? On a good team, the coaches hold the team accountable. On a great team, the captains hold everybody accountable. On championship teams, everybody holds everybody accountable,
Peer
right?
accountability. Yeah. Hmm.
Yes. And the way this plays out in real life, and I'll use an actual example. I'll take it from youth hockey into sales. So in youth hockey, we do like historically, the ice is really big, but the actual game that happens is in small areas, right? Like there's little one-on-one battles that happen in the corner, they happen at center ice, they happen in the slot. And so when you're trying to teach young kids that are coming up in the game, you want to get them used to these small area battles. And there's a offensive side and a defensive side to the puck. And what we do is we run a drill in a small area game where one guy's on the offensive side of the puck, the other guy's on the defensive side of the puck, and they battle. And then what do? They switch sides. Okay. So from a sales perspective, the way I think about that parallel is role plays. Like we'll use example of role plays. So typically, most companies, what they're doing is the manager is running the role play and the reps are the reps.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
What they should be doing is the reps should be running the role plays. One should play the customer and one should play the rep. And the coach is really there to coach, to mediate and kind of drive the exercise. And then they do the exercise. Everybody gives feedback to the rep. Everybody also gives feedback to the customer person that played
Mhm.
that role. And then what do? You switch the roles. Now, hey, now you're the rep and you're the customer. So I think like those types of group exercises where your team is actually the ones that are holding the rest of the team accountable to the messaging, to the objection handling, to the qualification management, you know, uh,
Yeah. Yep.
process that you believe in, whatever it is. It's there's so many out there now. Whatever it happens to be for that team that they've proven works for that technology, like that's how you create like championship teams in a sales organization. Is you create a culture of accountability where everybody is holding everybody accountable to the same standards, values, and expectations. And that's just like a small example, but I think
No, it's
it
perfect. I mean,
yeah,
because role playing is probably the most important practice drill, and there's a lot of flavors to it that we could be doing in a B2B sales. So I'll add to what you said. I love the fact that you're talking about switching sides, offense, defense, customer by salesperson. Um, have a other sales. So break into groups of three. So one of the salespeople should actually be an evaluator. So they
yeah,
have a bird's eye view of both interactions, and then yeah, giving feedback in a micro setting with those three people, then doing it on a bigger scale with the whole group. But what about situational awareness? What about the scenarios that play out, right? In basketball, you might have a pass that's coming in from the sideline. You might be taking the ball in from under the hoop. There might be 4 seconds left on the clock. There's these situations that we practice, right? So, what are your thoughts on creating scenarios ahead of time, ideally scenarios that are based on real interactions that you're hearing in recorded calls, seeing in email interactions, now taking those where we could have done better, we maybe lost and we didn't hit all 10 on our ranking for that call. Like maybe we can take that situation now and use it in a lab setting to, right, practice this. Would you
yeah.
be a proponent of that? Is that something you've seen? I'm
I I love that idea, and I think like initially, you'd probably have to have the leader like set the tone, like,
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
you're going to be the customer, and here's the situation. You got the competitive product, and you're a little bit of a jerk. So
right,
like
exactly.
go
And
into
also,
day.
and whisper in his ear, here, your competitor is this. The
Yeah.
problem you're having with your competitor is this, but they need to uncover that. Don't just give it to them, right? And that's the
100%.
other thing about it. I'm sure you do this in practice. You don't make it easy for these kids, right? Like
No.
you make it as difficult as you can realistically on what the game situations will look like. And I feel like that's another drop on us in B2B is that we make it so easy. You know, they'll do a role play. Oh, that went great. I love how you did this. And it's a love fest. When
Yeah.
honestly, in the back of your mind, like that was terrible. Oh my God, like, there's so much room for improvement. But you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings and you got to
Right.
be see. So that brings me to my next question, which is it easier to coach, teenage hockey players or adult salespeople? What's easier to coach in your mind in terms of accountability and accepting feedback and all that?
Definitely teenage hockey players. Like,
Knew it.
I mean, first of all, I was a teenage hockey player, so I know exactly
Okay.
what they care about. Like, the kids I coach are like 15. They care about like girls and,
Yeah,
like being cool and they
right.
care about hockey, right? Like they want to become great hockey
They're
players.
competitive like you were when you were
Yeah.
that age and want to be the best. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas like on the adult sales rep side, and you've already said this once, but I think it's really good call out is not everybody is motivated financially the way I am, right? And has the same story I do. At the core, there's something there that you have to uncover. And I always use the same example, but I had a rep that grew up the same way I did and was extremely coin operated, and she's the best rep I've ever had. And anytime we did a deal review, I would start I had the deck that I would go through with her, and the first couple slides were pictures of Birkin bags because like she liked to buy like really nice stuff because she didn't grow up with nice stuff. And I'd be like, hey, this deal is 4 Birkin bags of commission, right?
Bam. Yeah.
And now like
Correlate that real quick.
you'd see her eyes light up like, oh my God, okay. And she was dialed in on the deal review, like, oh yeah, you're right. I got to go get to this person. I haven't uncovered this part of their business problem yet. And you're right, I don't know the timing. Okay. Now I had another rep who wanted to be a leader, right? And that's what they wanted to do. So in those deal reviews, it was like, I would say, like, hey, listen, you got to look at this deal like you're the manager of the deal and you're not the rep. And you need to ask yourself questions that you think you would ask yourself as a manager. And then those deal reviews were really easy because now they were kind of taking my job and doing it themselves and holding themselves accountable like they were a manager. So like that's just two different motivations of human
Right.
beings. And you can't really lead someone until you know what drives them. And that's where it all starts, in my opinion.
Yeah, it always strikes me as something interesting that if you watch youth soccer or whatever, hockey, basketball, I mean, I'm talking about pee-wee stuff, as you progressively move up into the working world, I feel like the tonality, the word choice, just the overall bluntness of our feedback and coaching starts to soften as we get older. And it always struck me as something that it would almost be the opposite. You'd like want to be kid gloves with the kids, right? And then when you get to an adult, like you're 18, you're a grown ass man. Like, let's have this conversation. That was shit. You can do better. Now, maybe
Yeah.
that's a little more aggressive than it needs to be, but my point is, I feel like accountability is held captive a lot of times because of, employment law, the current state of our society. You name it. There's all these overarching circumstances that make it really hard for a sales leader, a frontline coach, to have a frank conversation about performance with underperformers. Because again, it's like you have to be so kid glove with them. Is that what you find?
Yeah, and like listen, like I mean, I had leaders that were just like mean and candidly like
Right.
that's how
And
my
I'm not
dad.
promoting that. I'm not saying be
No,
mean.
no, and that's how my dad was, and I, to be honest, that's what I respond to. So like,
Works.
good,
Right. Right.
good for them for figuring that out. Like, I think it's the real problem is when you drop the candor and you're not honest, and like you can be honest and candid with someone and still, and to be honest, that is kind. Candor is kind. Like that's, you owe that person the truth. um but you can deliver it in a nice way that's okay. And 2024 in this environment with all the
Compliment
laws and
sandwich. I mean,
regulations.
I hate to go back 20 years, but is that what we're talking
Yeah.
about? Give them something good, give them the negative feedback, then give them some good again.
Right, right. You call it, I have a different name for that, but yeah, I'll go with compliment sandwich.
Hey, there's no HR team here, man. You can say what you need to.
Yeah, we call that a shit sandwich where I'm from,
Shit
Derrick.
sandwich. Okay, yeah, I should have pulled that out. All right. Well, I love that. That's again talking about these parallels. So I'm going to spend 3 minutes with you, no more, and I want to do a quick rapid fire sales hockey analogy challenge with you.
Love it.
Okay.
Sales
So I'm
hockey.
going to
Let's
bring up
go.
a hockey term, and you're going to give me your best sales analogy.
Got it.
Okay. First one, face off.
That is the initial call. Like where are you putting the leverage point? Are you giving the customer the leverage point of like, yeah, we'll follow up, or are you making it so they're in a position where they have to take that next meeting?
Bang
You're
on.
pulling the puck to you.
Yep, bang on. Like that's literally what I had teed up. It's the initial presentation,
Yeah.
initial contact, whatever. Hat trick is the next one.
Oh, that's just a killer quarter, man.
Three
I
deals
didn't
in a
have
row,
yeah,
three. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't have many of those. I was a defenseman, but I had a lot of those in sales. Hat trick is a great quarter for sure.
All right. Now, again, I have never played hockey
Okay.
myself, so I had to like Google this stuff. So
I
bear
wish I
with
could
me.
see that.
Defensive zone clearance.
Defensive zone clearance is positioning yourself against the competitors without shitting on the competitors. It's
Overcoming objections, right?
100%. Or it's handling objections before they come up, right?
Diffusing
Like,
them. Yeah.
yes, exactly. It's like, hey, I know you guys are using this. They're great at X, Y, and Z. Have you ever dealt with A, B, or C? Right. And it's not like, hey, they stink and we're better. It's more just like calling out the gaps and trying to figure out if they see them the way you do, right? So that's kind of again, you're protecting the goalie in the net, right? I think that's a good
Two
good
points on
analogy.
that. There's a book on this that talks about how to get your competition fired without saying anything bad about them. It's called the wedge selling technique. So that's something for you guys to check out. Exactly what we're kind of talking about there. The other piece is a guest that I just recorded with Justin Michael. You guys might be familiar with the Justin Michael method. He wrote Tech Powered Sales and has a couple other books out recently. But he has a framework that he promotes, which is called route, ruin, multiply. And the multiply part of it is in that initial cold call, you're basically uncovering what they're using currently. But then instead of trying to, pin yourself against that or ask them to rip and replace, you ask them to multiply, to enhance, to add on, to run in parallel to what they're already doing, right? Let's amplify what you do. That's great. I love what you're doing there. That's great. What if we were to enhance that with what we're
I like
doing,
that.
right? And so it's a multiply effect. So, all right, last two analogies, and then I got a couple more questions, and I'll let you get back to your day. Slap shot.
Slapshot is I would say it's that closing call. It's
Exactly. Exactly.
we got a sign on the line, or what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like that's
On the
that.
line which is dotted.
Yes, exactly. And that, by the way, was my biggest strength as a hockey player was my slap shot because I shot a
Well, yeah,
lot of
and
them.
this is how well I do my homework, dude. 400 to 500 shots a day this guy would practice in his driveway. Dad would get home at the end of the day and ask him, "How did your shots go? How did you hit your shots?" Yes. Well, how did you do in your backhand? Because his backhand was his weak game. And so Pops was always on him about practicing that backhand, so there were no weaknesses in his arsenal. So
Dude,
yes,
you are dialed in, buddy.
dialed in
That is
again.
a good nugget right there.
There you go. All right, last one. Playbook execution. This should be easy.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the same.
It's
It's
the
the
same,
same.
right?
It's the same. It's like you're supposed to be here when they do this, and you're supposed to be here when they do this. It's that again,
It's easy to
it's
understand, but how many times do players miss their route? How many times they
oh,
miss their spot, their timing, right? And how many times do salespeople go off the beaten path, do their own thing, freestyling? You're like, what the hell are you doing? That's not what. how the product works and so on and so forth. But
Totally, totally.
thank you for
And
entertaining me on the sales hockey analogies.
that was good. I
Um,
like that.
all right, last couple questions. Number one, why? Because you talk about coachability a ton, dude. Like it's probably up in the top three words in your vocabulary.
Mhm.
Why the hell is coachability so important? And I have some follow-up questions to this. All right. So why is coachability so important in the sales setting?
You have two choices. You can use your own experience and get better, which is
Mm,
great. Or you have the option of listening to other people that have more experiences, multiply that by the number of people you're surrounded by, and you can hear from them what they're doing that's work or what they're doing that isn't working. And you don't have the hubris or the ignorance or arrogance to not take that and make it your own. You're going to miss out. I am who I am because I am the combination of every leader and every colleague that I've ever had in my entire career. Full stop. End of story. I'm the smartest parrot in the room, and that is all I am. That's
love that, man.
coachability is a core value for our company. Accountability, coachability, and authenticity. That's what we operate on. That's why I use it a lot.
Yeah, coachability, I think, yeah, definitely ties directly to accountability. However, here's my hook on this.
I love it.
We know managers don't coach. They just don't, or
Yep.
they don't know how. If they
Yep.
are coaching, that's not coaching. That's something else, what you're doing, right? And so, how do we bridge the gap here, right? We have a heightened level of requirements for coachability. Every leader talks about this, every job description talks about it. Managers everywhere are saying, I need people who are coachable. Basically, what I hear in that is you need people who will do what you tell them to do, right? Because you're not actually going to spend the time in some organizations. I think the vast majority, I mean, 20% of leaders probably are doing this really, really well.
Yeah.
Um, but you're asking for people to be coachable, but then you're not doing coaching. Bridge that gap for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think generally, especially the last few years, what's happened is like you get to this like manager level and you think you're above doing what you did as a rep, right? And the to go back to sports, the analogy is like the best captains in the world, the best coaches in the world carry the water bottles to practice and after practice. Like to really be a coach, you have to roll up your sleeves. You got to get in there with your reps and you've got to like actually do the work, right? So it's not like a review of salesforce.com and like, hey, this needs to be the next step here. Don't do that, right? It's like initially you need to be on there with them. You need to be kind of digging in with them. You need to be, whether it's listening in on calls with all the technology now or reviewing those calls directly with them and like, and then showing them that you can do it too, right? Because that's sales is a little different than sports, right? Like I think Bill Belicheck's a
Yeah,
good
he's not going
example.
to get out there and take hits, right?
No, no, but I guarantee you that every player that played for him knows that Coach Belichick wasn't asking them to do something that he wouldn't do himself, right? And that's the mindset. That's what your reps have to feel from you. That's when you're a coach and not a manager. And there is a huge difference, and I'm pumped that you called that out. So
Absolutely.
that's how I think about it, carrying the water bottles.
Yeah, I'll bring it full circle on my story of my brother as well. Like he was a football player. He played all kinds of positions, running back, special teams, you name it. And so when he gets out there, he can still outbench every one of the players that are on his team. Right. So when we talk about that 225 test, he's up there putting it up like 17 times.
Oh my
These
God.
kids are doing it 12, 15 times. And they're, damn, coach, damn, we got to get to your level, coach. Right. If that's not inspiring as hell, I mean, let's go back to the parallel. Why would an SDR manager not pick up the phone and make some calls? Right.
100%.
Especially when you're new, or
Yeah.
even if you're seasoned, you know what you're doing, you should be able to demonstrate what you're teaching people and look and be vulnerable enough to say, look, I screwed that up and I didn't do that well. I could have done better. Now you're getting into, really earning their respect because now you're like, damn, I could have done better. Because I'm sure Belichick had those moments too with his team where he was, called the wrong play. We didn't prepare that route well. That's on me, right?
Yeah.
Very good. All right. So in closing, last question. Take me back to the inflection point of starting Shift Group. We already went down your track record and how it's been progressive. You've shared your ambition of building a large and successful organization. But take us back to the inflection point of like building this. Not everybody has entrepreneurial ambitions like that and is willing to take whatever risks I'm sure you took. So what was the impetus? What was, where did the idea come from?
Well, Shift Group as it exists today, it came from what I was already doing. What we do, I was doing nights and weekends. I wasn't doing it for money. I just was helping hockey players from my network would call me and JR, you're not that smart. You made a bunch of money. You seem to actually like your job. Can you help me? Right?
Yeah,
And I did, and I helped a lot of guys and girls get jobs well before I ever started Shift Group. So, and I got a lot of emotional energy out of it, as you can imagine, Derrick.
right, right.
So,
Changing lives.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, like in a small way, it was like I really love doing this, and I think I can make some money doing it. Bigger picture wise is like because of the roles that I was in, because of the experiences I had building companies as a sales leader, I spent time in boardrooms. I spent a lot of time around executives and investors, and I started to see the fact that like they definitely have more experience than I do, but these are people, and this goes for everybody. These are people that are no smarter than I am. They don't work harder than I do. And as a sales leader, I was spending a lot of time, energy, and effort building a business and creating enterprise value for those people, right? And what I realized with the combination of the fact that I think this idea has legs and I can make money on it, I also know that I have what it takes to build a business. And I'm learning a lot and I mess up every day and it's always a learning lesson. But I know because I've been around the people that have done this and done it to a successful outcome that I can do it too. And I just said, screw it. I'm burning the boats and I'm
burning the
going all
boats.
in on
Yep.
this. And I'm gonna build enterprise value mostly for myself, along with the team that I bring with me.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's highly inspirational. A lot of people who are tuning into this podcast are either an entrepreneur themselves as a consultant in some respect in the go-to-market space, or maybe they're a leader thinking about going in that direction and starting their own thing, and kind of like I've done. And
Yeah.
it can be scary and it can be hard. And what you're doing is tremendously impressive. I think Shift Group's been around for close to 3 years now. Is that about
Two
right?
two
Two
years,
years, just
two
over two
years in
years.
February. Yep.
Wow, wow. And 18 employees, it looks like on LinkedIn. They have a podcast as well. You guys have to check out if you're looking for more conversations that are similar to this and you want to learn what it is to get dialed in as a salesperson. Make sure you tune into Merchants of Change, which is JR's podcast. JR, thanks, man. I hope we can do it again.
Thank you, Derrick. This was awesome conversation.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sales Consultant Podcast. If you'd like to support the show, it would go a long way if you were to write a short review on the listening app of your choice.